Well, here is another update from some of the things that I've been working on this week. So I have done some research and development into Dorico specifically this week, watched a lot of YouTube videos, engaged in a lot of the manuals and just Google searching things, even a little ChatGPT interaction back and forth. And what I've come to the conclusion, which kind of knew this going in, but wondered how much it impacted my project. Obviously, Dorico is a notation first application. So it's for those who are going to notate. Now, this fits my kind of method of operation because most of the music that I have written so far is for immediate performance, either in an education setting with my band or my community band, or weekly with the arrangements that I write for worship for winds and strings to go along with the rhythm section. And so, whereas the rhythm section can, play from chord charts, lead sheets, and just generally flow that way, I like to include trumpets, trombones, strings, flutes, those kind of instruments in a more organized chart fashion. So we play measure one to the end charts, and so notating is my default process when I'm composing or arranging. So that's kind of the way I've worked. It's changing obviously now after getting into this program and looking at some of the horizontal composition things for gaming and for film score, where you might open up Cubase and just start composing or whatever DAW. Typically in the past, I've opened up Finale and just written in Finale. And I find my strengths are there. I can audition parts, rhythms, things, and then not have to go back and recreate those parts for the actual live players to play them. So that's where I'm at, and evaluating the notation and the playback of Dorico. So obviously Dorico is very robust in the notation. I've had several friends that for 5 years have been trying to get me to switch from Finale to Dorico, and I was resistant because I'm so fast in entering with speedy entry using my MIDI keyboard and my computer keyboard back and forth. It's just second nature to me, and the way that Finale did, pitch first, rhythm second. And I know you can change that now in Dorico, but there are still some uncomfortable things in Dorico, and so I resisted moving. And obviously now I have to, because we can see the end is near. Insert song here. So, in exploring, trying to get a more realistic playback, obviously at this moment in history and development, there are essentially what I feel like after researching this week and before this week, but really getting into it and just really solidifying my thoughts on this week, there's really 3 different approaches. The first approach would be what has been commonly held by film composers up to this point, and that is having different tracks for your different lengths of notes. A natural track, a legato track, something like long, legato, or slurred, shorts, and then effects. Strings, and you might have something like pits, arco, those kind of things. So individual tracks, and separating the notes out. And there's all kinds of YouTube videos about how to do this, and that's been kind of the methodology for film scores for a little while, after virtual instruments have really taken a hold. I think a little bit more of a newer approach, kind of always been there, but is maybe not been as robust and now is coming on the scene, is the idea of key switches. Now, this in particular relates to what I'm doing, because if I was to score a score, let's say, for band, which I'm doing, Mine are symphonic band pieces, and I had the trumpet part. It would be very clumsy to have a trumpet part and then a trumpet part with legato, a trumpet part with shorts, and all of that in the score. So obviously, for the notation side of things, giving the parts to the players, giving the score to the conductor, we're not going to do that. So then the process would be okay, then you save it as a MIDI file, and in Cubase or whatever DAW you liked, you would split out those parts. Well, I'm trying to research ways to be more efficient and get a pretty decent result, a good result, without all of that extra legwork in your DAW. And that's what partly this capstone project is exploring. Now, whether it can be done satisfactory, we're still working on that. And that's exactly what I'm working on now. So I created my template for my playback template in general, worked on percussion maps, worked on instrumental library, worked on my tracks, naming those, getting those all with the VST instruments that I liked, or at this moment that I'm going to be exploring, and then did a few little cursory playbacks, adjusting using key switches. I got to tell you, at this moment, not very satisfactory. So exploring now, okay, how much time do I push into Dorico, knowing that it's primarily a notation software. And playback is decent, better than Finale, I will admit at this point. I like the interface, it's more modern. Probably, I would say, a little more intuitive than Finale on playback. Although Finale, many years, it kind of convolutes that because I'm very familiar over many years' use. But if I was to be honest, maybe not as intuitive for the first-time user. So all of that said, my next step is going to be exploring bringing the MIDI into Cubase and doing the work there on individual tracks, and then comparing the two. So this is where we are. So here is my Dorico file, and I had to also learn kind of Dorico, more in depth, beyond my shallow learning of it so far. And where kind of the magic of Dorico in these relationships is the fact that you can do your setup of all your instruments, and then you obviously you have your right part where you put into your instrumentation. You're going to use these playback techniques and dynamics and controls for CC controls for hairpins and things along that nature. And so it's very text driven. The text is going to call up the playback techniques. It's going to call up the VST instruments and connect and percussion maps, so on and so forth. So getting your head around that, learning that has been kind of what I've been working on this week. And a lot of it happens over in this play portion where we set up what's called in Dorico world these endpoint configurations. And you can save these endpoint configurations, and I saved mine as my Spitfire Symphony Orchestra Symphonic Band kind of deal. Primarily I'm using at this moment Spitfire Symphony Orchestra, but also some Opus in just limited, and I'm going to explore some Garrison sounds for band specific things like euphonium, which of course Spitfire Symphony Orchestra does not have euphonium, nor does it have a really great band sounding sax. Opus has some sax, but it's more geared towards jazz. So yeah, some things to work out there. But we work through this VST MIDI, get our tracks all set up. You can I've got my virtual instruments, and they come up in the Contact player, and then using the track inspector to begin to route these things through expression maps. So for example, here is the expression map that I set up for the flutes, and you can see here we've got the SSO specific key switches. So I arranged key switches first. My next step is going to be using UACC, which is a method of doing all of this through controlled 32 CC 32 values, which allows for a little bit better translation than into other DAWs, and Cubase is the one I'm going to be using, but maybe a little cleaner transport into there. Otherwise, in Cubase, I'm going to have to, and this is the next step, and will be the next video. I'm going to have to bring in the instrumental libraries and these expression maps, and so on and so forth, to try to match up as best we can. But in reading the documentation, it can be a little bit wonky, and that's the technical term, wonky. And you still have to do some work on the back end. So anyway, that's what I've been into so far this week. More videos to come. Thank you for watching.